Our next presentation will be Dual Dependency, Analyzing the Winger and Wingback Relationship. This will be presented by Sebastian Bush. Sebastian, along with his teammates Theo Schmidt, Caleb Heller, and Nick Rovelli, are students at Syracuse University. Sebastian is a data analytics intern with Carolina Ascent FC. That's one of the clubs in the new Women's Super League that launched last fall. And he studies sport analytics at Syracuse University's Falk College. His work has been published in The Transfer Flow, Sounder at Heart, and American Soccer Analysis.
Hi everyone, my name is Sebastian Bush, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a project that me and some of my classmates at Syracuse University worked on, titled Dual Dependency, Analyzing the Winger and Wingback Relationship. So in this presentation, I'm going to take you through why we chose to analyze this partnership, how we analyzed it using some clusters to create some archetypes for players, how we fed those clusters into some models that we ran, and then finally, what the conclusions of those models are and how they can inform decision-making in club atmospheres. So why did we choose this relationship? Well, there are plenty of relationships across the field that we can choose from, plenty of partnerships, but the reason we chose this one in particular was because we found that it had a kind of unique aspect to it that doesn't exist in some other relationships on the field. And that aspect is kind of this tug of war, where the winger in general has a more attacking responsibility and the wingback in general has a more defensive responsibility. And so the idea or the question is, how dependent is the winger on the wingback and how dependent is the wingback on the winger? How much agency do these players have in determining their single game performances? And how dependent are they on the players around them? So to do that, to start, we created some clusters to kind of gauge archetypes. And we used the provided Skill Corner off-ball run data to get an idea of what these players' tendencies were in possession. And so we grouped players by wingers and wingbacks, and we created 6 clusters for each position. And then we labeled them, and then we fed them back into the data set. So as an example, one of the clusters for wingbacks was an attacking wingback or like a ball-playing winger, so those kinds of things. And we used the off-ball run data as opposed to kind of on-ball aggregated statistics because we wanted to get an idea of what are these players trying to do and how might this impact the options that their partner has in terms of passing to them or connecting with them on the field. So just to give you an idea of what these clusters look like, here were the ball-playing wingers. And as you can see, these players succeed in dropping off runs and coming short runs, checking to the ball, offering options in possession. And you can see Angelina's name up there. We noted that many of these players were midfielders whose secondary position was on the wing. So when they did go out wide, they were carrying over a lot of those same tendencies. And we also wanted to show you the attacking wingback. So this wasn't the most attacking cluster. This was actually the second most attacking cluster. And this was more of a traditional overlapping, inverting wingback or fullback. And they excelled in kind of the area of support runs and overlapping, underlapping runs. And familiar name up there, Emily Fox, who led the data set in support runs. So now that we had these clusters, we wanted to feed them back into some models and see how they impact the game. And so we ran 3 models. The first was a winger dependency model, the second was a wingback dependency model, and the third was looking at how the performances and archetypes of both the winger and wingback impacted the team's success. So to do this, we split up the provided Y-Scout and dynamic event data from Skill Corner into 15-minute segments and looked at team expected goal differential across those segments, as well as some offensive and defensive metrics that we created for both wingers and wingbacks, as well as some other control metrics. And the first thing that we encountered pretty early on was low, quote-unquote, predictive power. I don't think I have to tell many of you in the room that it's really hard to predict the game, especially in small segments. And so we were kind of expecting this, but it did lead to some difficulties in reaching conclusions. And another limitation that we found was specifically with the wingback dependency model. We did our best to create a comprehensive defensive metric, but as other people have noted earlier today, it's really difficult to create a true good defensive metric, and so we didn't see a lot of significance in that model. But for the first model, what we did see was we set the dependent variable as the winger's offensive production, and then we looked at how the wingback's archetype and the wingback's offensive production impacted that across the game. And then for the third model, we looked at how they both impacted team performance. And to give you an idea of what these coefficients looked like, these were the coefficients for that first model, the winger dependency model. And if it's green, that means it's significant at the 1% significance level. And you can see that many of these, and specifically many of the archetypes, are not significant or had very little impact. But a couple things that I want to highlight are, first of all, this was our metric to kind of control for team quality. It was the team's expected goal differential during the season up until that point. And as you can see, it's significant, but it doesn't have a large impact on a winger's performance in the game. But if you look down at the bottom, you can see that the offensive performance of the wingback actually had a much larger impact. And so this partner quality, while it doesn't explain all of the variation in the data, it does have a larger impact than some of the other control metrics that we included. So if we expected this to be true all the time, which we don't necessarily because you can see the R squared in the top right corner, this would mean that around a 30 percentile jump in the wingback's performance would correlate to about a 7.5 percentile jump in the winger's performance. So there is some impact there, but the extent to which, a winger is fully dependent on the player behind him, or behind her in this case, isn't necessarily that great. So some kind of real world conclusions from this model. We found that performance was actually a much better determinant of, partner performance was a much better variable than partner archetype, and that wingbacks were less impacted by the matchup, and this may be due to some difficulties in creating defensive metrics. But overall, the one thing that we really wanted to stress out of this was, based on this research, whether it's decision making at kind of picking a starting 11 or looking for players to recruit in a scouting sense, there wasn't a true kind of Goldilocks archetype combination between wingers and wingbacks that led to increased team performance. And specifically, the agency of the wingers and wingbacks in determining their own performances in games was not impacted that much by the types of players that they were playing with, specifically in the position on the same side of the field. So overall, we found that performance was more important in this sense than archetypes. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.